NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance will bolster its defence forces as war intensifies in Ukraine. Following a meeting of defence ministers in Brussels, the NATO chief said the alliance will strengthen its capabilities across all areas. He also warned Moscow that NATO won't accept any attack on its territory.
Today, we tasked our military commanders to develop options across all domains: land, air, sea, cyber and space. On land, our new posture should include substantially more forces in the eastern part of the alliance, at higher readiness, with more pre-positioned equipment and supplies.
Tracking that meeting for us, our correspondent Shona Murray in Brussels. Shona, good to see you. Listening to the NATO Secretary-General there, it seems that the alliance is set to play a bigger role than before, particularly when it comes to Eastern Europe.
Well, indeed, yeah. I mean, we heard from Jens Stoltenberg there making the point that Europe has to reset its collective defence for obvious reasons. And we've seen huge, massive troop deployments to Europe's eastern flank. But I'm joined now by Michal Baranowski, a security expert in Warsaw for the German Marshall Fund. Michal, one of the things that, you're in, obviously, Poland, a lot of countries are calling for, including Ukraine, is either a no-fly zone or for NATO to take a stand and engage in the conflict in Ukraine, even without, let's say, an Article 5 trigger. Would that be possible? Is there a legal way, given what we're seeing in Ukraine, bombing of maternity hospitals, the targeting of civilians and so on?
Well, let's start with the fact that the war in Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine, is very much illegal. So, of course, the alliance would have the moral ground to support Ukraine. There is also a Budapest memorandum that obliged United States, Great Britain, but also Russia to guarantee security of Ukraine. So there is plenty of legal basis. The reason why the alliance is hesitant and has not decided to do that at this point is a threat of confrontation directly between NATO's forces and Russian forces, and possible escalation, even including a nuclear dimension by Russia.
And do you think it could be inevitable that you will find NATO engaging, though, given, as we said, that people assume that really the retaliation or the attacks from Russia are just going to get worse? So maybe that if you prolong the inevitable, you'll just have higher death toll.
I'm not sure if it's inevitable. It's true that Russia is incredibly brutal, and it's really a murderous war. We have seen a lot of the pictures, and for the viewers that have not seen the speech by President Zelensky today in the US Congress and the film that he has shown, it's really a must-see to see the death toll and the human toll of this war. Ukraine is putting up incredible fight. They are brave and they are smart, and they are really giving Russia a very, very hard time. Some estimates show that 40% of Russian vehicles have been destroyed by Ukrainian forces. So NATO will certainly continue to support Ukraine's government from NATO's territory, but with lethal aid. But right now, I don't see NATO going in. Fingers crossed, because this would be a dangerous situation. Fingers crossed that nothing worse happens in Ukraine anytime soon.
What do you think about the news that the talks seem to be going relatively well, and that one of the outcomes would be that Ukraine commits to not joining NATO, which would obviously mean that Russia has, I suppose, succeeded in some way by imposing its will on another country?
I must say that I'm more from the school of I believe it when I see it. This war was never about Ukraine joining or not joining NATO. This was a false narrative from the very beginning. It was clear that for Putin, the goal was to decapitate Ukraine's government and change the Ukrainian government into a puppet government. This is not happening anytime soon, and hopefully never, of course. So the real measure of progress will be a ceasefire to start with, but also an agreement to pull out Russian forces. And until we see this, it's really, yes, it's great to hear a bit of a different tone from Russia that is not demanding so-called denazification of Ukraine and is now going in a more mild direction. But it's just, I believe it when I see it. And I must say that most of the Russia experts here in Poland that have been looking at Russia for the last 30 years don't see it as a real progress, just yet at least.
Okay, Michal Baranowski, thank you very much for joining us from Warsaw. And back to you in studio, Helena.